these big dick deviants is all catching hell in 2024. It's up for all of them. It don't matter if you Diddy or whoever you is, TG Jakes, any of them. All lies will be exposed. That's all. And anyone who takes that the wrong way, know why they take it the wrong way.
What if the biggest story in Hollywood isn't the names you're hearing, but the names you're not? For years, the public has been told the Epstein files would expose everything, every connection, every powerful figure, every hidden tie. And yet, every time documents drop, the same question comes back louder than before. Why do certain names never seem to surface? When Ricky Gervais stood on the Golden Globe stage and told a room full of elite celebrities,
"It's like Jeffrey Epstein." Shut up! I know he's your friend, but I don't care.
"I know he's your friend," the laughter died. When Joe Rogan started questioning elite protection systems on the biggest podcast in the world, millions leaned in. And when Cat Williams warned that all lies will be exposed, people laughed, until 2024 started unfolding. Now celebrities are relocating. Sealed records are being unsealed. Survivors are speaking independently of official channels.
His reach went to the very top of fashion, arts, and entertainment. This did not just happen to underage girls in Florida. In New York City, hundreds of young, ambitious women were abused by.
And one name the internet refuses to stop circling is Oprah Winfrey. No confirmed charges, no official accusations, just proximity, patterns, and powerful silence. So the real question isn't just who's guilty. The real question is, who's being protected? And why does this moment feel different from every other time before? Something has shifted in 2024, and you can feel it. For years, the release of documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein has followed the same pattern. Headlines explode, networks tease bombshell revelations, social media lights up. And then, the momentum fades. Redactions appear. Key pages are sealed. Familiar names dominate the coverage. Others never surface at all. But this time feels different. Not because of what's being released, because of who's talking. When Ricky Gervais walked onto the stage at the 2020 Golden Globes, he didn't perform like a host trying to keep Hollywood comfortable. He performed like someone who knew the room was fragile. When he said, "I know he's your friend," the joke didn't land like comedy. It landed like a warning. The camera cut to faces that weren't laughing. That moment didn't age like a punchline. It aged like a signal. Then you have Joe Rogan, a man whose platform reaches more people weekly than most cable news networks. Rogan doesn't present himself as a journalist. He presents himself as curious. But curiosity at scale becomes power. And over the past few years, his conversations have circled the same theme again and again. Elite networks protect themselves. Different guests, different angles, same undertone. Power shields, power. And then there's Cat Williams. For years, people treated his interviews like rants. But in late 2023 and into 2024, clips resurfaced. All lies will be exposed. These deviants are catching hell. The tone shifted from dismissed to dissected. Because now things are actually happening. Sealed documents are being unsealed. Court records once buried are surfacing. Survivors are speaking more openly. And quietly, almost subtly, some major Hollywood figures are no longer where they used to be. That's where the internet's attention sharpens. Relocations, property sales, long-term moves overseas. Not vacations, not short-term projects, permanent transitions. When wealthy celebrities move, there are always explanations. Family, lifestyle, privacy. But when multiple figures begin exiting within the same window of escalating legal scrutiny around elite circles, speculation becomes inevitable. And speculation thrives in silence. The core tension driving this moment isn't just who appears in the Epstein documents, it's who doesn't. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Being named in a document is not the same as being guilty. And not being named is not the same as being uninvolved. Documents reflect what was recorded, what was preserved, and what survived legal filtering. That's where the concept of managed exposure enters the conversation. When information is released strategically, partially redacted, selectively highlighted, it creates the appearance of transparency without necessarily delivering the full picture. To many online observers, especially within Rogan's audience, this feels like a pattern. Release enough to satisfy public pressure. Hold back enough to protect the most powerful. That's the fear. And fear fills gaps with narratives. Now, before going further, one thing must be clear. There is no verified legal finding connecting Oprah Winfrey to Epstein's crimes. None. No charges, no indictments, no official accusations. But in the court of public opinion, proximity has become currency. Oprah built her brand on access. She interviewed presidents, billionaires, actors, royalty. She existed at the highest level of cultural power for decades. And in the post-Epstein era, cultural power itself is under suspicion. The internet doesn't just ask, who committed crimes? It asks, who knew? And more importantly, who stayed silent? Oprah was publicly supportive of Harvey Weinstein before his conviction. That is a documented fact. So were many others. At the time, Weinstein was one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood. After his downfall, the world saw how long rumors had circulated before consequences arrived. That history changed how people evaluate proximity. It changed how people interpret silence. It changed how audiences look back at old footage. When power collapses, hindsight becomes forensic. And that's exactly what's happening now. Old interviews are being rewatched. Award show speeches are being replayed. Party footage from elite gatherings is being clipped and circulated. Moments that once felt glamorous now feel loaded. Not because new evidence has emerged, but because trust has eroded. There's also a broader psychological shift at play. For decades, mainstream media functioned as a gatekeeper. It decided which names were discussed and which were ignored. But now, decentralized platforms dominate attention. Podcasts, independent creators, social media analysts. The narrative is no longer controlled by a handful of networks. That's why when Rogan explores elite systems, it spreads. That's why when Gervais mocks Hollywood hypocrisy, it resonates. That's why when Cat Williams warns about exposure, people revisit his words instead of dismissing them. The power dynamic has flipped. Audiences no longer assume innocence through prestige. They assume scrutiny. And when scrutiny intensifies, patterns become magnified. Here's the pattern many observers point to. Elite social circles overlap. Business relationships intertwine with social ones. Silence is often incentivized. Reputation management is strategic. Epstein did not operate in isolation. His social ecosystem intersected with finance, academia, fashion, politics, and entertainment. That's documented. Photos exist, guest lists exist, flight logs exist. But association is complicated. Many people met Epstein once. Some attended events. Others may have had deeper ties. The public rarely knows the difference. And that ambiguity fuels suspicion. When redacted documents are released, black bars create more intrigue than clarity. Every censored name becomes a question mark. Every sealed page becomes a conspiracy thread. That's the environment we're in right now. And that environment explains why Oprah's name keeps surfacing online. Not because of confirmed wrongdoing, but because she represents something larger. Institutional influence, cultural authority, moral positioning. When someone has built a 40-year legacy as a voice of conscience, the public holds them to a different standard. The scrutiny is sharper. The expectations are higher. Fair or not, that's reality. Add to that the broader climate of 2024. High-profile convictions. Ongoing federal investigations in entertainment circles. Renewed media focus on historical abuse cases. Suddenly, elite immunity doesn't feel as guaranteed as it once did. That's why relocations spark debate. That's why silence feels louder. That's why people are asking whether the Epstein files are just the beginning, not the end. The most powerful idea driving this moment isn't that everyone is guilty. It's that systems protect themselves. And when systems start cracking, people watch closely to see who steps back first. Right now, the American public is in a trust recalibration phase. Institutions once considered untouchable, media giants, film studios, record labels, are facing skepticism from every direction. And in that recalibration, figures like Ricky Gervais, Joe Rogan, and Cat Williams function as cultural pressure valves. They say what others won't say directly. They frame elite hypocrisy as humor, curiosity, or blunt commentary. But beneath it all is the same question. If everything is being exposed, why does it still feel incomplete? Now let's go deeper. Because this isn't just about documents, it's about behavior. When powerful people feel pressure, they don't panic publicly. They reposition quietly. And that's what has people watching closely in 2024. Look at the pattern. Major celebrity relocations, high-value properties sold, long-time public figures suddenly choosing privacy. Individually, none of that proves anything. Collectively, it raises eyebrows. When Ellen DeGeneres relocates to the UK after decades as a dominant daytime figure in America, headlines frame it as lifestyle change. When Richard Gere sells a long-held property and moves abroad, it's described as family reasons. When other recognizable names quietly reduce their U.S. footprint, explanations vary. But the internet doesn't evaluate moves one by one. It zooms out, and it asks one question: why now? Timing is everything. The renewed unsealing of records connected to Jeffrey Epstein didn't happen in isolation. It happened in a climate already tense with legal accountability. Harvey Weinstein convicted. Ghislaine Maxwell sentenced. High-profile investigations expanding. Public tolerance shrinking. The era of too big to fall looks weaker than it did 5 years ago. And when institutions wobble, those inside them feel it first. Here's the critical point. The street isn't claiming every relocation equals guilt. The street is questioning whether elite confidence has cracked. Because for decades, there was a belief in permanent insulation. Money, lawyers, influence, access. Those things formed a shield. Now that shield doesn't look as solid. And that perception alone changes behavior. Add to this the resurfacing of old footage, clips from exclusive parties, archived interviews, award show speeches. Moments that once seemed glamorous now feel loaded with subtext. When celebrities joke about crazy parties from the past, the laughter hits differently. When interviews include phrases like, "There's a lot I can't say," audiences don't hear mystery. They hear caution, and caution triggers curiosity. That's why discussions around elite party culture have intensified. Names like Sean Combs, widely known as Diddy, are now viewed through a different lens amid legal scrutiny and ongoing cases. The public has learned something uncomfortable over the last decade. Abuse ecosystems thrive in silence. Not always because everyone inside them participates, but because enough people choose not to disrupt them. That distinction matters. Participation and proximity are not the same, but proximity without action raises ethical questions. Now enter Oprah Winfrey back into the conversation. Again, no verified charges, no legal findings. But proximity to powerful figures historically linked to misconduct has fueled online speculation. Oprah's career was built on access at the highest level. Presidents, billionaires, Hollywood titans, media moguls. Her brand symbolized trust. So when trust in elite systems erodes, even icons feel the ripple. The internet asks, how do you operate at that altitude for decades and never see the storm clouds forming? Is it possible? Yes. Is it plausible to everyone? No. And that gap between possible and plausible is where speculation lives. Here's another layer. Reputation management in elite circles is strategic. Crisis teams exist before crises happen. Public relations isn't reactive, it's preemptive. If damaging associations exist, they're distanced early. Statements are calibrated. Language is careful. Silence is intentional. We've seen this pattern before. Before Weinstein fell, rumors existed for years. Before Epstein was widely exposed, whispers circulated in finance and academia. The public only sees the explosion. It rarely sees the buildup. That's why when comedians like Ricky Gervais take jabs at elite hypocrisy, those jokes age differently over time. Comedy has historically been a pressure release valve. It allows uncomfortable truths to slip into public space without formal accusation. When Gervais said, "You're in no position to lecture the public," it resonated beyond humor. It tapped into resentment toward perceived moral superiority from insulated elites. Then there's Joe Rogan. His platform doesn't rely on red carpets or studio approval. It relies on audience trust. When he questions institutional transparency, it spreads without gatekeeping. Millions hear it, and millions form their own conclusions. That decentralized conversation is what makes 2024 different. It's not just what the government releases. It's what independent voices amplify, and what audiences connect on their own. Now let's address the redaction issue. Redacted files are standard in legal processes. Names of victims, ongoing investigations, privacy protections, all legitimate reasons. But when powerful figures appear consistently absent while lesser-known individuals are exposed, suspicion grows. Fair or unfair, perception shapes narrative. And right now, the perception is that exposure has tiers. Tier 1. Individuals already fallen from grace. Tier 2. Mid-level associates. Tier 3. The untouchables. Whether that tier system is real or imagined, it drives engagement. And engagement fuels momentum. Survivors speaking independently adds another dimension. When victims say they remember names not publicly listed, people listen. Memory isn't a legal verdict, but lived experience carries emotional weight. If unofficial lists emerge, even as testimony, the pressure multiplies. Because then the story moves beyond courtrooms. It moves into culture, and culture is harder to control. That's why this moment feels unstable. It's not one document drop. It's cumulative erosion, trust eroding, prestige eroding, immunity eroding. For decades, fame functioned as armor. Now fame functions as spotlight. The bigger the name, the brighter the scrutiny. Which brings us back to the core tension. Not who is guilty, but who was protected. Protection doesn't always mean covering up crimes. Sometimes it means softening narratives, redirecting headlines, minimizing association, choosing what becomes front-page news and what fades quietly. In an era where archives never disappear, the public can rewind. They can compare past statements with present realities. They can cross-reference timelines. They can spot inconsistencies. That power shift unsettles traditional gatekeepers. And when gatekeepers lose control, speculation accelerates. It's important to separate evidence from emotion. There is documented criminal behavior tied to Epstein and Maxwell. There are confirmed convictions tied to Weinstein. Those are legal facts. But broader elite networks exist in a gray zone. Social overlap does not equal criminal conspiracy. Yet repeated overlap creates unease, and unease demands explanation. Right now, explanations feel insufficient to many observers. Every space where influence concentrates. And that's why this conversation refuses to die down. Because whether names are confirmed or cleared, the question of protection remains. And once the public starts asking who was shielded, they don't stop at the first answer. Now we arrive at the uncomfortable center of this entire conversation. Not the headlines, not the viral clips, not even the document drops, the system. Because when people talk about the Epstein files, they're not just talking about one man. Jeffrey Epstein is no longer just a name. He's a symbol of how power, wealth, access, and silence can intersect for years before accountability ever shows up. And that's what has shifted in 2024 and beyond. The public no longer views elite circles as glamorous by default. They view them as insulated. And insulation invites suspicion. For decades, fame acted like armor. If you were culturally important enough, socially connected enough, financially powerful enough, controversy rarely stuck. Even when rumors circulated, consequences were delayed. But look at what's already happened. Harvey Weinstein, once untouchable, convicted. Ghislaine Maxwell, sentenced. Major figures once shielded by reputation fell when enough pressure accumulated. That pattern changed public psychology. It proved something critical. Power can crack. And when people see cracks, they start looking for more. This is where figures like Ricky Gervais, Joe Rogan, and Cat Williams become culturally relevant beyond entertainment. They're not prosecutors. They're not investigators. They're amplifiers. Gervais used a global stage to mock moral hypocrisy inside Hollywood. Rogan created a platform where institutional skepticism thrives. Cat Williams openly predicted exposure within elite circles years before multiple scandals broke wide open. Individually, those moments were dismissed as comedy, curiosity, or controversy. Collectively, they form a narrative arc, one that says, the public is done being talked down to by insulated elites. And that's why the name Oprah Winfrey keeps reappearing in online conversations, not because of charges, not because of indictments, but because she symbolizes something bigger than herself. Cultural authority. For 40 years, Oprah positioned herself as a moral compass in popular culture. She elevated voices. She interviewed survivors. She spoke about justice, empowerment, and accountability. So when elite accountability becomes the national conversation, people naturally ask, does the moral compass apply evenly? Again, there are no verified legal findings connecting Oprah to Epstein's crimes. That fact matters. But in the age of collapsing trust, proximity alone can fuel debate. The internet doesn't separate symbolism from association very cleanly. If you were in elite circles during an era now exposed as corrupt in parts, audiences want clarity. Silence no longer satisfies. Carefully worded statements feel insufficient. Because this moment isn't just about law, it's about transparency. And transparency is cultural currency now. Here's the deeper layer most mainstream conversations avoid. Elite ecosystems are rarely built on explicit conspiracy. They're built on mutual benefit. Access for access, influence for influence, silence for stability. No secret handshake required. Just shared understanding. If someone in the circle behaves in ways that raise concern, speaking out can cost you relationships, opportunities, access. So people stay quiet. Not necessarily because they participate, but because disruption has consequences. That's the system people are questioning. Not who committed crimes alone, but who maintained the ecosystem. And once you frame it that way, the conversation expands far beyond Epstein. It touches philanthropy, media, fashion, politics, music, film, any environment where exclusivity becomes currency. When audiences say, release all the names, what they're really saying is, end the hierarchy of exposure. Because right now, it feels tiered. Some names dominate headlines, others remain whispers. Some are scrutinized relentlessly, others seem immune. That perception, fair or unfair, drives distrust. And distrust fuels independent investigation culture online. Forums dissect timelines. Podcast audiences compare statements. Archived interviews resurface. Nothing disappears anymore. Every old clip lives somewhere. And context changes over time. Statements that felt harmless in 2015 feel loaded in 2026. Jokes about elite parties don't land the same way post-Maxwell conviction. Casual mentions of knowing powerful figures carry different weight after Weinstein's downfall. The cultural temperature has changed, and temperature changes perception. Now let's talk about the idea of managed exposure. Governments redact for legal reasons. Investigations require discretion. Victims deserve privacy. All true. But history has also shown that powerful individuals can influence narratives. PR teams shape stories. Lawyers negotiate language. Networks decide airtime. So when files are released with heavy redactions, people don't just assume legal necessity. They ask, who benefits from what we're not seeing? That question doesn't accuse anyone directly. It challenges structure. And structural distrust is harder to calm than individual scandal. Because structure implies continuity. If one powerful figure falls, the system survives. But if the system itself is questioned, everyone inside it feels vulnerable. That's why this moment feels larger than previous cycles. It's not just about names, it's about legitimacy. Does cultural influence equal moral credibility? For decades, many Americans equated the two. Now they separate them. You can be influential and still be flawed. You can be celebrated and still be silent at the wrong time. You can be powerful and still benefit from proximity without committing a crime. That nuance is uncomfortable because it doesn't offer clean villains and heroes. It offers gray zones, and gray zones don't trend as easily as clear accusations, but they linger longer. The reason conversations around Oprah persist online isn't because of proven guilt. It's because she represents institutional trust, and institutional trust is under review. The same applies to any long-standing figure deeply embedded in elite networks during eras now under scrutiny. This isn't a courtroom, it's a cultural recalibration. The American audience has evolved. They question narratives faster. They verify information independently. They distrust uniform media framing. And once distrust sets in, it demands more than reassurance. It demands evidence. If more documents emerge and they show nothing implicating certain high-profile figures, that clarity will matter. If survivors provide names, and those names withstand scrutiny, that will matter too. But until the full picture feels transparent, speculation will continue. Because ambiguity is oxygen for suspicion. Here's the reality. The Epstein case exposed confirmed criminal behavior at high levels of society. That alone shattered illusions. Now the public wants to know whether that exposure was isolated or representative. And that question doesn't disappear with one document release. It persists until transparency feels complete. Whether that moment ever fully arrives is uncertain. But one thing is clear. The era of blind trust in elite circles is over. Comedians saw the hypocrisy and mocked it. Podcasters questioned it. Outspoken entertainers predicted collapse. Now the audience is watching to see if the exposure goes all the way or stops at the safest distance. Because in 2026, reputation alone is no longer protection. Visibility is no longer immunity. And silence no longer guarantees safety. The spotlight has widened. And once a spotlight expands, it rarely shrinks back to its original size. The story isn't over. In fact, it's just getting started. Every document released, every redaction lifted, every survivor speaking out brings the truth closer, but also raises more questions. Who is being protected? Who is staying silent? And which names will finally come into the light? The power of this moment isn't in headlines. It's in connection, seeing the patterns, hearing the warnings, and paying attention to the behavior of those who move in elite circles. Comedians, podcasters, and survivors have been signaling this for years, and now the public is watching closer than ever. That's why your awareness matters. Stay informed, cross-reference information, revisit old footage, follow credible voices, question narratives. Because the moment transparency meets scrutiny, culture itself begins to shift. Drop your thoughts below. Which names do you think are still hidden? Who do you believe the Epstein files haven't fully revealed yet? And most importantly, do you think the full truth will ever be exposed? Keep your eyes open, stay alert, and never underestimate the power of collective attention. This story is far from over, and the next revelations could change everything we think we know about power, influence, and accountability.